Okay, if you remember, we were doing the planning chapter on planning. We started that, and we covered these 21 slides, and we were on 22nd slide, and we were still talking about the requirements. We did say what are the requirements. Requirements are covered under the knowledge area of scope, although requirements should have been a separate area, but because requirements are the basically job of the business analyst, and they were started when the business case was being developed. So we are in a way continuing on with the job of business analyst, and project manager is going to elaborate and finalize the requirements before the product scope can be established. Therefore, requirements is considered an area within the scope. So first we conclude the requirements by collecting any further requirement from the customer, and then we move on to scope. I think Tahir is trying to join. Welcome, Tahir.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Walaikum salam. We
Hello.
just started, Tahir.
Oh, okay. Fine.
Okay, so we have covered a little bit about requirements in the last class. Today we are going to talk about various tools and techniques we use during this process. As you understand, collection of requirement is something which happens only in predictive and hybrid projects, because in an agile project, requirements are rather continuous. We don't finalize the requirements in the beginning before establishing the scope, but in agile, we continue on with the project while the new requirements are new user stories and pouring into the product backlog. Therefore, it is slightly different from what the agile scoping is. So right now, I'm only going to talk about the uh, predictive and to some extent the hybrid project where requirements are collected in this way. So the very first tool we have in requirement gathering is the expert judgment. I mean, the first tool is expert judgment. And probably I did mention expert judgment in the earlier slide, where I said that expert judgment is not only the judgment made by the project manager, but he could, consult with his staff, with his team members, with any other outside experts like a consultant or a subject matter expert, or any of the stakeholders or any experts in the market. So before you make your decision, you could consult as a project manager with anyone, and that tool is called your expert judgment. Second second category is interpersonal and team skills. Now, interpersonal and team skill is how you gather information or requirement from various people. Well, how do you interact with people? Uh, First one is nominal group technique. You go to, you discuss it with people, and you conclude the requirements by coming to a consensus, maybe through a voting process or maybe through discussion. Another way of collecting information from the interpersonal point of view is you don't ask questions, you just observe, like, doing a face reading or kind of observing their environment, how they work and all. So actually, there are a lot many requirements which are clarified when you get into their system and try to observe how they work without asking any questions. Just you to a keen observation, you would understand a lot many things. That is called observation. And facilitation is very common. That is when you are talking to one of the stakeholders and trying to uh, get something out of them and they are not able to explain, you facilitate them, you cool them down, you provide them cues, you provide them facilitation as if they can comfortably interact with you and come up with more sane information. Well, these are just interpersonal and team level skills. But when we talk about data gathering, we are going a little deeper into it. When we interact with people, we have to see with whom are we interacting. I mean, I have to gather requirements from the stakeholders, and stakeholders include even the customer, even the your team members, outside people, everybody. So one tool is brainstorming, and well, I should not have mentioned it as a first tool because brainstorming is something which happens after the first interaction. Brainstorming relates to what? Is it logical thinking or is it something else?
Illogical thinking.
Creative thinking. We call it creative
Creativity.
thinking.
Yeah.
Now, creative thinking should come after you are exhausted with your options in the creative thinking. When you are making sane decisions or something, you start with logical thinking, or you call it uh, logical thinking or state thinking. And once you are exhausted with your options, you want to explore more options, then you start playing with the idea. You start coming up with things which are not sane, which are not logical, but they could be having more deeper meaning. So that is where the brainstorming comes in. But I'm not saying that brainstorming can work everywhere. Brainstorming may not work in certain circumstances, but where you have to explore things further, like you're collecting the requirement, like you're identifying the risks, like you're identifying and exploring what all activities could be there in the project, such like circumstances are you want people to come up with new ideas. So that is where brainstorming works. So naturally, it does have a very important place in requirement gathering. Okay, if you know who holds the data, there are only a couple of people who hold the data, and I can go to them and talk to them very intimately. That is called an interview. So if there are only a couple of people, I can probably interview them. Like, in many instances, I have been engaged as a consultant, and we had to study or observe an organization, gather some data from them. So I used to go to the, higher level of executives to talk to, who could brief me about their departments, about their working, and they can give me a lot of information. So interview can be very useful when there are only a few people and they hold a lot of data. So it is just a matter of going to them and interviewing them and intimately discussing with them, and you get a lot of information from them. Well, in an interview, I am mostly I start with uh, I mean, not a creative approach, but a logical approach. But uh, once I have exhausted their logical options, then I can go on to the creative side as well. But unfortunately, what happens is the person I'm trying to interview may not be holding all the data. And whatever question I ask that guy, he's referring to his subordinate that, okay, this data can be better explained by that person, and this data I don't exactly know details about. So what we do is we resort to the next option, which is called focus groups. Rather than interviewing a single person, we call a small meeting with the most important knowledgeable people within that department, as if they can answer all the questions in a meeting, in a setting of a small meeting. So we are having a focus group, and there we can discuss things out. We do have all the experts about that department, and whatever questions we have, they will be answered. But you remember focus group? Do you remember any problem with the focus group? Do you understand when we work in this kind of environment where there are all the experts in one department sitting in front of you and we are discussing and asking questions, will it be as comfortable as an interview, or it would be better or it would be bad? What do you
We
think?
said last time that focus group, there may be a group of people who are not as honest in front of you because there's an audience. So they might be a bit more open in a one-on-one setting.
Actually, the problem, we can always add those people in the focus group, right? Who are actually required to be there and they are not there. That is not a big issue. We can always add them to the focus group. Anything you think which is a disadvantage of the focus group?
No, we said that last time. Some people might not be comfortable sharing their view in a large settings.
Exactly. That is a point which we said it is a group thing, right? So
Yeah.
we don't want to think, we want the whole group thinking like each other. We want them coming up with unique ideas, and then we can progress further. Of course, this is it. Focus group is good, but at the same time, it probably promotes the process of group think, and we don't like group think. If the audience is large, but they are present at the same site, we resort to another mechanism which is called facilitated workshop, which is not listed here, but in the next slide, I will be showing it to you. A facilitated workshop is that maybe your organization has a very large number of customers, number of employees, and there is a policy that they involve and engage them in all decisions, which should be a good process. You want to get a feedback from as many possible from the organization, our customers, our stakeholders, as much as possible. And understanding that most of the people are available at one site physically, you may organize a facilitated workshop which could accommodate 100, 200, 300, or 500 people. And you can present whatever requirement gathering you have done so far, whatever you understand of the requirements, whatever you understand of the statement of interviews and focus groups, and share that information with the whole wide audience. And after you have explained that, you could ask them their opinion if they want to add any further requirements or any other comments to that. So it is good. It is good that everyone is kind of now informed about what is going to happen, and we are even asking their opinion. But again, we have the same problem as we had in a focus group, that first of all, people are very shy to speak louder in a very large group. Number two, if someone has given out an idea, the others will start getting into a group think situation. They will not speak, but they will start agreeing with the idea which has already been given. So this is the same disadvantage of a group thing, which happens in a setting of a facilitated workshop, and naturally we have to have some mechanism to outset that. So that is called facilitated workshop. But naturally, if your organization is spread out in many cities, many areas are dispersed globally, it won't be possible to have a single workshop. So when your audience is spread out in a very dispersed way, we resort to another mechanism which is called questionnaires and surveys. But this is a very good method, but this is not as accurate as the physical methods we have already talked about, like interviewing, like focus groups, like facilitated workshop, because all of them were qualitative methods, because we actually were face to face with the other person and we were talking to them, and it was more intimate, right? The smallest gathering, like an interview, was most intimate, and less intimate was focus group, and even less intimate was the facilitated workshop. But when you can't see them, you can't talk to them, you just have to communicate with them through papers like questionnaires or surveys. Then you have to design these surveys and questionnaires in a very deliberate manner. You should not have any open-ended questions in these things. You should have closed questions like yes or no questions, or you could give options 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you could say select anyone. So it is more quantitative in nature, and this is although a very good method, because we can use statistical data analysis on that, and we can come up with quite good results. But whatever happens, qualitative form of gathering data is more intimated and more accurate. In a quantitative method like questionnaire and surveys, we are trying to assume certain things. We are trying to play around with statistical samples and come out with some judgment. I'm not saying that statistical uh, quantitative analysis is useless. No, it is not useless. It is very important, because the people you could not have reached, thousands of people, hundreds and thousands, maybe millions of people, you have collected their data, and whatever you are summarizing through this statistical analysis is definitely it represents their opinion. Anyways, these are various methods, but one thing is benchmarking. Again, I think I have talked to you about benchmarking. What is benchmarking, Tahir?
It's basically comparison with the rivalries. You can
With
say
the competition.
competitors.
With the
Yes,
competition.
competition. Yeah.
It is not comparison with a standard, it is setting a standard, looking at your competitors and trying to be better
Yes.
than them.
For like you can say best practice.
To reach the best practice, to,
Yes. To reach the
adopt the
best.
best practices, yes, of course.
Exactly.
Okay, what else do we do in the requirement process, collection of requirement process? We do the data analysis. Now we have gathered the data. Now, how do we analyze? Naturally, we do the document analysis. We can look back into the lessons learned register, older records, and things like that. And we can get a lot of data about that requirement from the various sources, and we can analyze them very deeply. It is more like an observation kind of a thing, where we could interact with them, but we are trying to decide on various requirements based on the data available with us. Second is alternatives analysis, and then is product analysis. Now, these two things are very interesting, because when we have all the requirements gathered from the customer, we have to see which are the sane requirements and which are insane requirements. Which are the requirements which should enter into the product scope, and all the requirements which are most important and which should enter as the product scope, how would they be accomplished? What are the various alternatives that could be done? So these two things are very important to us. Product analysis, as I said, is done when all the requirements have been collected, and we have to discuss with the customer are all these requirements which they have given us, are they really important to be included in the scope of the product, or some of these things could be dropped off, which are not important, or which may be out of scope of the product. So because when we were collecting the requirements, we were collecting anything and everything. Now we have to finalize which of the requirements are higher in priority and more important to the customer, as if we can keep them and others we can drop. Now there is a difference between the final requirements and the scope of the product. Only those requirements which have been finalized, which have been agreed that they have to be included in the project, they will be developed as the product, they will be developed the product scope. Because product scope is dependent on the requirement, finalized requirement. Yes, please.
I need an example, Suhail, in terms of data analysis. I don't quite understand the difference between document analysis, alternative analysis, product analysis, when you are still just collecting. What would be an example of that? What are we analyzing?
Okay. Document analysis could be the previous projects we have done, our previous initiatives we have taken, are the way the operations are happening in the organization. There are a lot many documents available in the archive. We can refer back to them and try to see that, okay, similar requirements were existing and they were important, or they were not important. Are they fitting into our framework in this current project? Is it that important? And things like that. Now, that document analysis is not only interesting and necessary for deciding which requirement should be, that any further requirements should be gathered or not, but in selecting the proper requirements to be kept in the product scope.
Okay.
Okay. Then I had already talked to you about product and project scope or not.
Mm-hmm.
The difference between product scope and the project scope.
Project scope is the scope of the product that you're trying to work with, whereas the project is about the framework of the project itself, not the product.
Okay. By product
Sir.
scope. Product scope.
Product scope basically what we can add in product, product features maybe.
Yes, yes. So it is nothing to do about the work. Product is actually the translation of all the requirements which have been gathered. So what all the functions and features should be there in the product? That is going to be my product scope. It has nothing to do with how we will make it. That is the other analysis. So product analysis is the analysis which selects the right requirements which should be added in the scope of the product. Because there might be a lot of voices, a lot of requirements. When I try to prioritize them, I would see that some of the requirements can be dropped down. Right? And from the point of view of the project, or for that matter, product, the most important requirements which should be added in the functioning of the project should be these. So, finalized requirements will be further shortlisted or further refined into a product scope. Product scope is very important to me because that is where we enter into the zone of project management. Now we understand what are we supposed to make? What are the dimensions of the product we are going into? The next question is, if I am sure about the scope of the product, all the specifications are clear to me, The question is how to do it, isn't it? That I am now
That
trying to determine based on the scope of the product, what should be scope of my project. So based on the product analysis or product scope, we will develop a project scope, and project scope will actually need to do the alternative analysis, right? That what are the different ways available to me to do this kind of specifications and this kind of product scope? How can I do it? I gave you an example of, the product was a chair, right? You were supposed to construct a chair with all the specifications available. That means you have the product scope available. Now, how would you do it? What are the alternatives open to you? This is called the alternative analysis. Whether you make it yourself, you hire a person to make it, you outsource it to a contractor to make this chair, or you buy it from the market. Whatever you do, these are the various options or alternatives available to you. So that is called alternative analysis. When we are doing alternative analysis, we are getting into the world between the product scope and the project scope. All this is being done in a very interesting process, which is called scope statement, developing the scope statement, right? So we are actually pointing towards that, but here I have explained to you what all different analysis could be done on the data we collect for requirement. We do the document analysis, we do the product analysis, we do the alternatives analysis, and I have amply made it clear why are we doing the product analysis to establish a product scope. And why are we doing the alternative analysis? That is to establish the project scope, right? That will actually link the things to our project, and we will be confident that the data we gathered was useful, and we could reduce it into a product scope and ultimately into a project scope. Now, there would be many points, many instances where you have to make certain decisions. You will be double-minded. You have to consult with your team and your stakeholders, maybe for some kind of voting, because everything is not black and white. Naturally, there are some decisions to be taken, and you have to ask them for their opinion. And there are many processes, many ways of voting. And if you are trying to go more logical, then sometimes you take averages of something. You say, okay, how many of you are in favor? How many of you are in against? So you say, okay, more than 50% people have voted in favor, so let's go for that. That is a simple decision. Or if there were more than 2 opinions, you could take an average of that. In a multi-criteria decision analysis, we have more than 2 options. Not only that, but they have got different weightages. Some of the options are more important than the others. We can't give them all equal weightage, right? So we decide their output through a multi-criteria decision. Maybe there were 3 parameters on which I am asking opinion, but one of the parameters is very important, right? That is given 3 times more weightage than other 2 areas, right? So that means 1 time weightage to the other area and 3 time weightage to this area. So that way, what is going to be the multi-criteria decision analysis? My output would be an what do you call it? Weighted average. Have you ever heard about a weighted average?
Yes, we have done it.
We have done it. So what we do is we add up the weightages, that is 1 for the first option, 3 for the other option, 1 for the other option, that will come out to be 5. Then I'll sum it all up and divide it by 5, right? Unlike an average where we always divide it by 3. So whatever the weightages you have given, add them all up, and based on that, you do the multi-criteria decision analysis or weighted averages. Anyways, if it is getting more complicated, we can discuss it later. But if you are understanding it, just give me a note that it is understandable.
I think there is a slide ahead for multi-criteria
Yeah,
decision
of course.
analysis.
These
Weighted average, yeah.
all of these things are defined in the subsequent slides. But I'm
Yeah,
trying to make a background frame that your mind is a bit clear about all the concepts. Now, once you
exactly.
have gathered the data, analyzed the data, made certain decisions, after that you have to represent your data in form of some kind of diagram or chart, or in a way the others could anticipate and understand it. And for that we use several techniques. I can draw a model, I can draw a drawing, chart, or some kind of a thing which could make things clearer. All my effort, which I have done for maybe a couple of months, I am trying to translate that, represent that data onto a single chart. That could be, those techniques could be like mind mapping. Mind mapping is a technique where, just like a work breakdown structure, where we break down a thing into various options and we keep breaking it downward. Here we put the main idea in the middle of the paper and expand around it. So main idea, main topic is in the nucleus, and then we expand around it. We say, okay, there are 5 sub-ideas around it. So we make 5 circles around that central circle, and we connect them to the main idea, right? And
Is
then we keep breaking them down, and outwardly, from center outward, we keep expanding. This method is called mind mapping. It is very popular these days. Affinity diagram. Affinity diagram, I'll show you how does it impact, and context diagram, they can be explained when I show them. Last but not the least, when the data has been represented on paper, then the customer, the participants, the stakeholders, they might need further assurance of understanding how it will look like. So for that, I will develop prototypes, 2D models, 3D models, or something like that, which will convince them that all their requirements have been understood and it is proceeding in the right path. This is the whole journey of collecting requirements process, right? This is actually, we are going to talk about each one of these things. Why I have spent a lot of time here on this one slide is because it talks about everything, right? So let us talk about these things in a little more detail. And here we can see the various methods of collecting the data. Like I talked about interviews. So interviews identify, define features and functions of the deliverable. That is the purpose. That's where we are talking to various people. It can be structured and unstructured or asynchronous. Nurul, do you understand what is a structured interview and what is an unstructured interview?
Is it, as the words are, a structured interview as you go through a series of questions, like a planned question, whereas unstructured is you go with the flow in terms of the answers from
exactly. Very right. And what is the asynchronous and synchronous interview?
Where is that, Suhail?
Can you see this?
Oh, I don't know what that is.
Asynchronous is an alternative term for the unstructured interview, where we are more like talking to each other, interacting more on a very what do you call it, intimate terms. We are more frank with each other. So that is an unstructured asynchronous way of doing it. A synchronous way, I ask question, you answer. I ask question, you answer. That is a structured way of doing it. Anyways, you do understand because you might have conducted various interviews in your life. And what are the advantages? Naturally, we are, because we are more intimate, we can handle sensitive and confidential information. And there is no chance of a group think here. You understand that point? There is no chance because there are two people talking to each other. So nobody else's ideas can influence us, right? Nobody's senior, nobody's junior. I am an interviewer and you are an interviewee, and I am asking questions and you hold the data, and you are trying to intimately communicate back your answer. It also helps identify stakeholder requirements, goals, or expectations. So because we are more intimate, we are more frank. So we can talk about why, how, and where. Considerations are the potential drawbacks are it captures only a single point of view. We are tracking to one person only, right? So whatever the idea of that person is may or may not represent the whole. Now, let us directly jump to the focus group. That is, as I explained, that if the data is not available from one person and one key position holder does not cannot answer all the question, or I want to address the potential drawback of single point of view, probably I would jump to focus group. Focus group is good, but you see, it is casual. Again, naturally, it is a very small group of people and all experts. So yes, we are still casual, not very intimate, but we are still casual. But here the advantage is we are interactive. We are all we are discussing, we are talking. So interactive information sharing is there. And you, the interviewee, are the information gatherer. You are the moderator. You are moderating the discussion. You are trying to, divert the discussion into the right direction if it gets out of hand. And it includes all the important stakeholders and subject matter experts who must be there in this small group who hold the data. And just like an interview, this is a qualitative data. It is a quality of discussion which yields a lot many things. But this is better than interview because it is not addressing only single point of view, but we are having multiple experts' point of view. This is good, but the advantages are pre-selected participants for the varied opinion, a very select group, small group for focused approach and gathering specific information. So it is easy to handle. But disadvantages were, what did I say? Groupthink is the biggest disadvantage. Out of this group, some people may be more impressive due to their seniority, due to their position, due to their knowledge. And once that person has spoken, others are gone. They can't, they don't want to give their opinion. They tend to agree with the opinion of the more influential person. That is a group thing, which we somehow have to counter in this case of focus group. And naturally, if you have a focus group, you must have a representation of some kind of subject matter experts, and you must do a lot of facilitation, right? I'm not trying to address here the, how to deal with groupthink. That is another issue. I'll talk about that later. Okay, if the things get out of the focus group and we want to discuss it with a wider audience who can all be available at one place, I would resort to facilitated workshop, which is the last option, last call. That is, naturally, I can't have a discussion with 500 people. So I would rather be presenting conclusions of my data gathering so far from the questionnaires, from the focus groups, from the, not the questionnaire, from the interviews and the focus groups, and I will try to make them aware, all the group of 500 people, what we have found, what we have discussed, and these were the requirements we were given. Now, the house is open to you. If you want to add something to that, you are most welcome. That is what is the purpose of facilitated workshop. But then, because it is a large audience, it has to be kept in control. Right? So rather than launching a discussion of 500 people, we would have a more moderated, more controlled kind of environment in which you may say, raise your hand who are in favor of this idea and things like that. Or you can say, okay, you can coin your opinions one by one and we are noting them down. You don't have to get into a discussion in the large crowd. You just note those opinions. Again, there is a problem of a focus group here. So the third option could be, you could say that, okay, write down your point of view and submit it to us. You could put a box there where they can put in their suggestions or their points of view. Or you could say, okay, we are giving you an email address or something. You can send those things to us. So this is again qualitative. But the question is that we could use a little bit of quantitative approach, a little bit of statistical analysis may have to be needed, but largely this is also a qualitative approach. But to deal with the thing of process group, there is a technique I'll talk later. It is called a Delphi technique. Are you aware about the Delphi technique, Nurul?
What was it?
Delphi. DELPHI. Have you ever heard of this term before?
No.
Let me write it in the chat window.
I am more
I think
thinking at this point, Suhail, your business case has been approved,
okay,
right? And you are now trying to collect the requirements. Is that where we are at?
yeah. Project
Right.
manager has been assigned and project manager is doing
Project
this.
manager has been assigned, so now you're trying to collect requirements, right? So you have subject matter experts in your in your project group, you have other expertise in the team, and now you're trying to gather the requirements using various different methods, whether it's interview, whether it's surveys, observation, focus group. And this sheet is trying to tell you what are the advantages for each of the methodologies. You might not do it all, but you will pick and choose depending on what you need.
Exactly. Very right. So, as I said, apart from interviewing, we have a problem of groupthink. In a focus group, we have problem of groupthink. In a facilitated workshop, we have problem of groupthink. And groupthink is, as I said, is a bad quality. I have seen people who think groupthink is something good. I was listening to a speech of a politician, and he was saying that we should promote groupthink. That is a very bad understanding of the concept. Groupthink should not be promoted. Groupthink is a negative characteristic. We have to counter it.
Did you say groupthink?
Yes. You want me to write it?
Please.
In the chat window? Do understand that groupthink is a negative trait because this bounds your creativity. Your opinions are sealed. You don't want to, freely share your opinion because someone more influential has already given an opinion otherwise, which is different from your opinion, and you don't want to be slighted. You don't want to be put down, right? So you rather adopt the thinking of the other person, and ultimately the whole group starts thinking like one person.
Yeah.
Which may look like very good. Okay, everybody is on the same page. It is not being on the same page. It is like adopting the thinking of others. So to counter that, we have to do something, and that is to keep the opinion of everyone private and secret, anonymous.
Yes.
If I can get all the anonymous opinions somehow then I will be able to entertain all the opinions anonymously and again present them all the points I have gathered and ask them to vote. That is Delphi technique.
Yes.
That is a Delphi technique. And this Delphi technique is the original form of this technique was in olden days, they used to, write letter to all the experts and ask them for their opinions. All the opinions are gathered and they are summarized. And then again, they are sent the collection of all the opinions without who gave those opinions. Like the anonymous, there's a list of say 200 opinions, and they are sent back to all the experts, and they are asked to select the top 10. What do you think are the top 10 ideas, right? So everyone has given a top 10 list. We see what are the common ideas in the top 10. And if there are many differences, then we send them those 10 ideas again back to these people and ask them to, shorten the list to, say, 5 ideas. And somehow, by this to and fro movement, we ultimate are aiming at a consensus, anonymous consensus, where everybody comes up with the same 10 ideas, right? That is called a Delphi technique. But you see, the wideband Delphi is a modern technique in which we want to apply this long elaborated process, which could be expanded over months and months. That Delphi technique could go on for months and months. But we want to make a decision in 30 minutes, right? And we want to discuss only with the people present. And we are ensuring that all the subject matter experts are there, like in a group, a focus group, or in a facilitated workshop. We can apply wideband Delphi. We can ask them to submit their opinions anonymously, maybe on a piece of paper or something, or like a voting process where nobody else knows what they have voted for. And then we are summarizing those things we write all the points in the facilitated workshop. We display them on a board and we ask them to vote, right? And ultimately we gain our consensus. This is called wideband Delphi. Anyways, as I said in a facilitated workshop, team can capture requirements, stakeholders can understand the concerns and requirements. There is a difference between groupthink and, bringing everybody on the same page or a shared understanding. Shared understanding is an intelligent way of bringing everyone on the same overall idea, rather than people being influenced by other influencers, people with more influence. So not the group think, but the shared understanding we want to develop purely based on knowledge, not based on influence. Right? As we studied the shared understanding earlier, I just wanted to clarify this point. So this is a very good tool, the facilitated workshop, to spread the message around in the whole wide audience. But in this setting, as we said in the focus group, that we need to facilitate that, there is a lot more facilitation required, a lot more control required in a large crowd. So facilitated workshop is a very interesting exercise, and you must be well in control of the situation. Okay, when all of this is not possible, then we will have to resort to remotely collecting data from larger audience spread globally. All the stakeholders who are even not present here, how can we get their opinion? So that is through the questionnaires and surveys. These are written formats. They are sent out. They are very carefully designed questionnaires because we can't have kind of open-ended questions here. Because if we get open-ended questions answered by 2 million people, then probably it is not possible to even read all those opinions.
So when I'm doing my requirements collection, right? the project that I'm working with is typically not too large. It involves not a lot of people.
Right.
But when you're talking about some of the really complex big project, you're
Yes.
talking about a large group of people, right?
Yes, of course.
Okay, like you're talking about a big project like building a tunnel, for example, where it
Yeah.
involves the council and this and that, like a lot of stakeholders. Whereas for a warehousing project, for example, it involves very, less than 10 people.
Well, I would say that number of stakeholders, even in a small project, couldn't be that small.
Okay.
Even your team members are stakeholders, and team members, you have 20 team members only, right?
Mm.
So if you have 20 team members, there are at least 40 or 50 different stakeholders who have different interests in the project. Even in the smallest of projects, your facilitated workshop can accommodate around 70 or 80 people. And in a large project, this could go into thousands and more.
Okay.
So that's why we have that thing. But in questionnaires, when it is difficult to reach out to everyone,
Mm.
and we have to send them out some certain questionnaire to collect the data. But remember, open-ended questions are, I say, what do you think about this thing? And they start writing their opinions. And if
Mm.
so many people sent out those opinions, and somebody is sitting to read those opinions and compile those opinions, this is again the Delphi kind of a thing going on. We can't afford that. Open-ended questions are not really encouraged in a questionnaire, although some of them can be there, but they are not really very encouraged. In a questionnaire, we want to have closed questions like, what is your opinion about are you agree or disagree with something, right?
Yeah.
Are you select the options given here? You give them 5 options, 3 options, and they have to select out of them. This is quantitative data. This is good for a very large group, and it will consolidate the data results statistically. And again, it could give very good and very sane results. But remember, qualitative data is always better than the quantitative. But if the audience is very, very large, the quantitative data would be preferred. So question and survey should be designed in a very intimate detail, very nicely, as if they represent the opinion of everyone. There should be a quick turnaround. You should adopt a method in which you could get your responses quickly. Nowadays, there are online questionnaire formats, which could be filled in a couple of minutes. Even the research scholars doing PhD, they send out your questionnaire and you just take a couple of minutes and fill them out. So that could be very instrumental. But in olden days, it was always on paper, and that used to send out the paper. They would take their own time to fill it, and then they will send it back. That will take a lot of time. But nowadays, the things have simplified, and we have online questionnaires available. I think that could have a very quick turnaround. It could be very effective with varied and geographically dispersed respondents. The people are not at one place. They may be spread out globally, and it yields quantifiable data. And quantifiable data is really very, very good for statistical analysis. And we can rely on the results of the statistical analysis quite a bit. But it might be time consuming. It might answer data quality depends on question quality. I mean, you could, as I said, you could not ask a lot many qualitative questions because that is difficult to handle. So we are more focused on the quantitative data. Anyways, I suppose I have explained this slide in quite a bit of detail. Should we proceed ahead?
Mm-hmm.
Sure, sir.
Okay, this slide talks about data gathering, all the data gathering technique, which I have already explained to you, I will take them one by one, right? So benchmarking was one of them. And as you understand, I want you to really understand these concepts very intimately, right? It should not just be fly on the wall. It should be really, you should be an expert of doing these things. So if you have to do a benchmarking, will you do it against? Nurul?
Best product in the market.
Best product in the market, in a way, I would say you would see who are the people who are creating better product or using better practices than you. That means we are focusing on finding the best practices.
If
And
we're
out of whom?
talking about
Yes, please.
data gathering, let's say my project is about supply planning
Yes,
in the planning role, right?
yes,
And I want to buy a software
okay,
to suit the business, a supply planning tool.
okay.
Isn't benchmarking looking at what's available out there in market?
Yes,
Or
we
is bench
are trying to look at our competition. The people
so
who
we're
have done
looking at
similar things earlier,
okay.
they could be other projects which have been done or which are being done. They could be other organizations, other who are dealing with these kind of things. So we'll look at them before starting our project. We want to find out how are they going ahead with it and how can we improve our way of working, looking at the practices they have adopted, which are better than us.
So you're looking at two things then. One is the product itself, and
Yes,
the second one is other companies that are doing a similar thing to what my company is doing and see what they're using.
yes, exactly.
Okay.
That is the point. So I am
Okay.
looking at my competition. That could be other projects within our organization or outside of the organization, or other organizations using some kind of their own best practices. So we try to identify all of those best practices as if improve, we can improve our working. We can improve our processes accordingly. That is forward looking. That is even more than good practices. We are hunting for best practices. So benchmarking, if someone says that benchmarking is about the following our standard, I won't agree with it because it is not, if you follow our standard, standard is never the best practice. Standard just gives you the good practice. But if you go beyond that call of duty, then you will be able to identify best practices. So this is a hunt for best practices. So therefore, benchmarking, maybe you select that, okay, this organization is better than us, and we will try to compete with them, and therefore, they are our target now. You are now going to benchmark yourself against that organization and try to adopt as many of their practices as if you can match them and you can overshoot them. You can be better than them. You want to exceed ahead of your competition. That is how the benchmarking is defined. Well, this is done usually in the predictive project. In Agile, we may use it, but it is not very common because it relates more to the overall planning, overall requirement analysis. Okay, now if you have understood the concept of benchmarking, can you give me an example where you have used it? Have you ever used benchmarking in any of your projects like this?
Yeah, that's what I said, where we contacted our procurement and tried to find out what application or software for supply planning that are available out there. And they're okay, but a lot of companies just want to sell their software, right? So what we really want to do is actually look at our competitors and see what are they using and why are they using those software and what can we learn from them. And
Right.
some of them are very open, so they're happy to share, like this software didn't work for us because it couldn't do daily fresh. This
Exactly.
software worked for us because of this, but that takes a lot of time to reach out to different companies and, you know, asking them
Exactly.
such a
You know,
personal question.
I have been in the field of computers for some time, and I used to consult some magazines like PC magazine. Uh, uh, there was one like a PC shopper or something that used to give you the analysis of the best laptop, best computers, best desktops, and all that. And you can find these kind of analysis online as well. So that is exactly what we are trying to do. We used to study those analyses and try to find which is the best out of them or which is the one I want, right? So we are now better equipped to benchmark our system which we want to design according to the market leading trends, right? Tahir, are you okay with it?
Yes, sir.
If you are comfortable with benchmarking, let me move on to the next data gathering thing. And here we have various tools for prioritization. Now, you do understand that prioritization otherwise is more important from the point of view of an agile project, because in agile project, we do a lot of prioritization throughout the life of the project, right? But even in a predictive project, when we are doing, when we are trying to develop the product scope out of the various requirements of various stakeholders who have been given to us, then we have to shortlist them. And to shortlist them, we have to prioritize as if we can come up with a product scope. So those methods are common to agile and predictive both. And these are the methods listed here, some of them, not all of them. One is called a Moscow analysis, which was developed by Dirac. If you can eliminate the vowels out of it, we have M, S, C, and W. M stands for must have requirements. S should have requirements. C could have requirements. And W won't have requirements. So you have created a list of all the requirements, and out of them, you are trying to prioritize the most highest requirements are must have, that they are highest of priority and they have to be done anyways. You can't skip them in any case. So must have requirement, out of the 100 requirement, maybe 10 are must have. They have to be completed first. And once they have been completed, we can consider the second higher priority, which is should have. If we are not left with any time and we could only complete must have, that will give at least highest level of satisfaction to the customer. So should have may or may not be done, but we would always prefer that during our project, we should complete all must have and all should have. But we can sacrifice a bit of should have requirement in favor of must have requirement. Suppose
Who does that?
well, team does that. Team sits down and the people who are actually collecting the requirement, we sit with the customer actually. We are talking with the customer who is giving the requirement, and we are asking them, how important is it to you? Which is the highest priority requirement for you, right? Just like we do in Agile.
This experience, Suhail, where we sit down with the customer,
yes,
and they're not compromising. Everything is a must-have.
Because you are dealing with a predictive project, right?
Yeah.
In a predictive project, you still need to discuss with them that, okay, you have given that in the contract that this thing should be done, but you see, we are not saying we will not do anything for you. All of those things, we want to do it. But what is most important to you? Please let us know. let us categorize all the requirements in 4 boxes: must have, should have, could have, and won't have. Now, won't have is the least important, category, which may not be done, which, if not done, will not harm the objectives of the project. And could have are optional category. If none of them could be done, that is still all right. But you see, in a predictive project, we will discuss that with the stakeholders and the customers. And in light of that, we could rewrite the contract, we could amend the contract, we could ask them that, okay, let us exclude certain requirements from the contract as if we are not bound in a predictive project for that. So won't have maybe excluded, and even could have, the customer is of the mindset that though they need those requirements, but they may or may not be fulfilled.
Okay.
Right? So with that understanding, we could amend the contract and we can go on with predictive project with confidence now. So it compares the several points of view, is used with time boxing, especially in Agile. It is really very important because in Agile, it is not important to do all the work. It is important to do the high priority items, right? Okay, there is a similar model to Moscow, which is called Kano model, and this is more a product management technique. It was developed by Noriki Kano. And rather than having the Moscow type thing, we have got, again, 4 categories here. Those requirements which could delight or excite the customer, right? If you are trying to sell something to the customer, you show the most important characteristics of the product which will delight the customer or excite the customer, right? So they are the highest priority requirement which must be fulfilled. Then there are satisfiers, those things which will satisfy the customer. They will serve as soothing the customer. They are like, the butter on top of it. It's a cherry on the top, right? So they are a source of satisfaction for the customer. So they are like should haves. And then we have got dissatisfiers. Those things which are bothering the customer, if we could remove them, we could remove the dissatisfiers, they would be even more satisfied. They would be, more comfortable with it. And then there would be certain requirement the customer is completely indifferent about. Means it doesn't matter to them if it is done or it is not done. That would be equivalent to a won't have category. Just like we discussed Moscow analysis, Kano model almost deals with the same kind of thing, but Kano model is more akin to a product kind of a thing. Moscow analysis could be done on any decision. But anyways, both you have to choose which method will apply more appropriately to you. You can adopt that, right? If you are dealing with a product, maybe you would like to go for a Kano model. If you are more dealing with a process, you may like to go with a Moscow analysis.
What would be the example in industry, for example?
You are trying to, develop a product which is physical in nature. So probably we may like to go for a Kano model. If you want to develop an idea or a process, you may like to do it through a Moscow analysis.
So like if you were to develop a new car, a new vehicle, you might want to go with the Kano model.
Yeah, of course. But it's a physical thing. It's a product.
Physical in nature.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas
still it is your decision. Both approaches can be used on the same project, right?
Okay.
But it is more appropriate if you're dealing with a product, then probably you would be more interested in seeing what delights the customer, excites the customer. Because naturally,
a product.
yeah.
I guess a product is, if they can imagine it, it's what gets them excited, right? No one
Exactly.
particularly gets
Yes.
delighted over a process. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
Okay, clear.
Then there is a paired comparison analysis, which is developed by Thurston, L.L. Thurston. And this is a very simple way of doing it. And this happens all the time in Agile, but even in predictive, if you have to sort all the requirements in an order of priority, this could be a beautiful method. At any one time, you just compare any two requirements. For example, there are a stack of requirements lying in front of you. You pick up the upper two cards and try to compare them and see which is more important to you. Now, we are not calling Moscow or Kano. We are just saying that this one is more important than this one, right? Whichever is more important, that goes up the stack, and the other one goes in the second number. Then we pick out the third card out of the stack and compare it with the top one. Whichever is more important goes on top, other goes down. For example, the third requirement is more important, that goes on top, and one goes down. That means 3, 1, and 2 are not prioritized. Similarly, if we keep doing with all the 1000 requirements, ultimately we will end up with a stack of prioritized requirements. We use that technique more often in a product backlog. You agree with me in an agile setting, but if you have to somehow prioritize all the requirements in your predictive project, I would say this method can be applied there as well. But I can assure you, by doing this paired comparison over the whole requirement, it will give you a stack of completely prioritized requirements, the highest on top and the least at the bottom of the stack. Do you agree with that?
You're talking about paired comparison.
Yeah. Paired comparison.
So you have a list of all of your requirements and you just go, is this one more important than the one above it? And then you rearrange things.
Yeah, it's a little time consuming, but it is very absolute. It gives you a completely highly prioritized set of requirements. Then we have got another method, which is called
When would you use that?
Yes, please.
When would you use paired comparison?
Paired comparison, I would like to use in a agile project most of the time.
Okay.
Because my purpose is that all the requirements must be in an order of priority. But I'm saying that optionally you could have considered doing it during your requirement analysis. Before developing the product scope, you may have adopted this method. But it is not compulsory in predictive, but it is very compulsory in agile. Last but not the least here, although there are other methods, but these are just 4 methods discussed here. 100-point method. Now, interestingly, this was developed by Dean Leffingwell and Don Windrick, and this method allocates 100 points to every voter. Every stakeholder is given 100 points. You can treat them as monopoly money, or you can treat it as kind of 100 votes, whatever you want to call them. But 100 units are given to every person. That, okay, you have this much, and now you can do your voting. Every person has got 100 votes. We have got these 100 ideas on the wall. Now you can give as many votes to any idea, but you have a limit of 100 votes. Now I may be in favor of only one idea. I can give all my 100 votes to that one idea, right? Or I can give 50 points to one idea, 40 points to another idea, and 10 points to other idea, and I do not vote. Do not vote for other 97 requirements. That means my votes are distributed somehow. Or I could give one vote to every requirement. That means I am indecisive and I am giving one vote to every. That does not matter. If a larger audience is voting for it, or maybe even if it is not a larger audience, if there are 25 people who are voting for it, you will get a handsome result out of it. Once the voting is done, we add all the votes collected for every idea, and whichever idea got the highest vote goes on top, and then the second, and then the third. This is another method of prioritizing all the requirements. And again, I would say this is more appropriate for us agile method, but it can be used in a predictive method, right? I hope all these methods are very clear to you.
Yes.
Moving on, now we have to represent this data. Representation of data, as I said, could be in way of some kind of charts, graphs, or some visual aids which could represent whatever we have gathered and we can present our results on screen or on charts to all our stakeholders to make them conveniently understand the results of our findings. Now we have got mind mapping, which we discussed already, in which we put the main idea in the center and we expand outward. It is usually done on a large piece of paper in which you write the main idea you are trying to explore in the center of the page, make a box around it, and then you divide that idea into topics of discussion, the expansion of that. Say there it is subdivided into 5 categories. So 5 boxes will be created around it and they will be linked to the main idea. And then you keep expanding it out, and this is called mind mapping. This is used to consolidate ideas created through individual brainstorming sessions into a single map. Now, interestingly, this is not always logical. This is more helpful in a creative environment where you are trying to think out of the box. That means it is more holistic. It can explore more ground than what you can logically think, because you are trying to think out of the box. So capturing all the creative ideas into the big picture, that is very interesting on a single page of paper or on a single map to reflect commonality and differences in understanding and to generate new ideas. Right? So I would go for this mind mapping if I am doing logical thinking as well as the brainstorming or the creative thinking. I would like you to explore this concept of mind mapping on your own if you are not using it already. It is so popular these days that if you just make a search in your mobile, in mobile apps, you will find hundreds of applications on mind mapping. They are really useful. They are really useful. And you can do all that on your mobile screen. And if you are not really satisfied with the size of the screen because there's a lot of data and you have to scroll right and left, maybe you can install some desktop applications on your computer or laptop. So this could be really very helpful, but it can be done manually. It could be more cumbersome, but it could be done manually on a piece of paper, on a large piece of paper, right? Maybe in form of a big chart or something like that. People could contribute, people could draw on that and things like that. Then we have got the affinity diagram. That allows for large number of ideas to be classified for review and analysis. That means, just like mind mapping, we come up with a main idea and then we discuss this idea could be broken down to these areas, and then we classify all the ideas into those boxes, right? Just like, we put, okay, these are the product related ideas here. These are the, different. So we can put them into separate boxes, just like we did the Moscow analysis at Kano model. So basically, we are trying to classify the various ideas into various categories. That is called the affinity diagram. So these are only some of the ways. Like, you can see on the screen, you could have graphs, you could have various types of graphs, the spider graph, the pie graph, or whatever. All these methods can be used to represent the data. But we are not going into the detail of that. One of the diagrams or data representation could be a context diagram. Now, this is not very complicated. This is a very simple diagram. For example, you are trying to establish a university. Or what all are the entities which are going to interact with the university? What would they want from the university? And what would university want from them? That is identification of these entities and developing their relationship. These arrows show what do we want and what do we get. For example, from the education community and the industry, they request the university for providing educational services. And what does the university give them? The educational services. The government and private sector is requested by the university for providing the funding. And what do they provide? They provide the funding. User community may be requesting the university for some hardware, software support, and university provides them that support. This is a very simple diagram. This is not as complicated as other visual tools, other representation mechanisms, but this is very simple. But this is really good to understand the relationship with all other entities. This is called a context diagram. I know most of the people don't make things like these, but they are really very important because you could quickly refer back to that chart and understand, oh, okay, with this stakeholder, I had to provide the stakeholder these things, right? This is their main interest, the chief interest. So that way, this diagram may be very important in some cases. Coming over to the prototyping, as you have already understood, it could be a 2D model, 3D model, smaller model, life-size model, or something which is just for kind of approvals, like we said, minimum viable product. And to convince the customer, we could come up with storyboarding, like a cartoon strip in which we tell the story how this thing will happen, and we will try to convince the customer by that story, right? And if the conveyance is customer is convinced, that means that serves as our minimum viable product in case of agile, right? But even if you are not using agile, you are still using prototyping, isn't it? So far so good. Okay, before I can start with the scope, because we are done with the item related with the requirements, we are still in scope, but we are now explicitly going to talk about scope management. How to develop the scope management plan, how to do the scope statement, how to develop the work breakdown structure. But before doing that, I would like you to have a little break. Is it all right with you? So because I've been talking for quite some time and you need a little longer break, I will like to give you a break for 20 minutes. Will that be fine with you?
Yep. I'll see you at 20 to 8.
Yes.
Is that right? 20.
Okay.
What's 20 minutes now?
See you
7:45.
Yeah.
Okay.
See you
Bye-bye.
at afternoon. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum.
Now I'm back.
Welcome back, sir.
थोड़ा सा लेट हो गया.
नहीं कोई मसला नहीं.
ठीक जा रहा है जी.
जबरदस्त सर, शुक्र है अल्लाह का.
Hello.
Hey,
Hello.
welcome back.
Thank you.
Welcome. Okay, so we should resume our discussion from the next process. Actually, let me list down to you what we are doing here. According to the predictive project management, we have, just a moment, let me write it down here. From the predictive project management point of view, we have to develop plan for management. Sorry. That is one process. Under that, we have got two management plans. Requirements management plan. We have already talked about. And now we are going to talk about the management plan. So these are two ingredients of the very first process, and we have already covered the requirement management plan so far. Okay. Now, but we have also covered another topic, and that was another process, which was collect requirements. We have done that. The third process is develop scope management. Sorry, scope statement. We are going to be addressing that. First of all, we are talking about the scope management plan. Then we are talking about the scope statement. And then we will be talking about creating work breakdown structure, right? And with this, we will be done with the planning of scope. As I told you earlier, requirements is part of the scope. Rather, it is the initial part of the scope because scope will be developed based on that. Right. Now, let me see what was in the previous slide. Yeah, we were talking about this slide, right? Okay, so here what I am referring to, I am referring to this thing, scope management plan, right? What we have done already, we have done requirements, we have done this, and we are right now talking about this, right? So after we have done the scope management plan, we will be done with the topic of plan scope management, right? Okay, so scope management plan, which includes two management plans, the requirement management plan and the scope management plan. Requirement management plan, as we talked already. What is the scope management plan? Now, scope management plan gives you the complete guideline. You create it as a project manager in a predictive project. You create this scope management plan, which tells us how to establish a scope statement. Meaning, when I say scope statement, that means how to establish the product scope, how to establish the project scope, and as we talked about in requirements, how to do the product analysis and the alternatives analysis, come up with a ultimate scope statement, which will include all these things like the product scope, the project scope, the alternatives, and the various things like that. And also, if we have any constraints, limitations, risks, etc. You would say we have already done that in the business case and the project charter. We have provided the constraints, limitations, and all those things. But you see, when we were doing the business analysis, we were doing the business, building the business case. At that time, lot many things were not clear. So the constraints and risks and all that we identified, they were very high level. Even at the charter level, although we knew a little bit more detail, but that also could not be considered a quite deep understanding of the constraints and all that. But as we move deeper into it, we are going into further detail. So when we develop the scope statement, we have even a refined form of constraints, risks, and others. So we are better off than the business case and the charter. We are in more detail now. Once that is done, the scope management plan also tells us how to further break these things down into work breakdown structures. I mean, the breakdown to the work package level. We'll talk about that. And once all of these things have been done and work packages are being defined, then we should baseline the scope. Then we should baseline the scope. The procedure for doing that is given here in the scope management plan. Remember, we are not talking about the requirement management plan, which we have done already. We are only talking about the scope management plan. This gives us the description of this process, and this process. I mean, scope management plan gives us a description of how to develop the scope statement, how to create the work breakdown structure. And after that, once all the planning processes of scope are completed, that is the point when we have to baseline the scope. We have to present this final shape of the scope in front of the stakeholders as if they can approve it. And once they have approved it, we can't change it until through a change request, approval is sought from the higher up and they allow us to change the baseline. Only then any changes to scope can be brought. Anyways, what I am trying to explain here is we are doing the guideline, or we are writing the rules of the game in scope management plan. We have yet not done any one of these things. It also tells us that later on, when we have done it, we are in the monitoring and control, or what would be the formal acceptance criteria? What are the formal acceptance? Where naturally, this formal acceptance criteria is coming from the requirement. The customer has given us the requirement and they had provided us in the contract a formal acceptance criteria. Now we have to enforce that during the monitoring and control. So our scope management plan will tell us the formal acceptance, how that can be done. And this whole document of scope management plan could be, for small projects, it could be maybe informal, or it could be broadly framed But for larger projects, it could be quite formal, following a format, and could be quite highly detailed. So it is just not a two-page document like a charter or one-page document like a charter. It could be a detailed document, right? So this is what I talked about, the scope management plan. So scope management plan tells us everything we are going to do subsequently. So with this, I could say that we have covered the scope management as well. And by doing that, we have ultimately covered the whole plan scope management and whole collect requirement. Now we are to deal with these two things, right? So moving on. Next slide talks about the project scope statement. Now you understand what is in the statement of scope, which we have already described in our scope management plan. So we have to look at it. The first input is project and product scope. Project and product scope. I would say product scope is first identified and then the project scope is identified, right? So as I had shown you already, what is the product scope and the project scope? Then there must be some acceptance criteria which will be followed during the monitoring and control when we are handing over those requirements to the customer. That is actually done through another process. Let me write it for you in a different color, as if you know that this is no more the planning. So the fifth process of scope is control scope, and the last process of scope is scope validation. Is 6. So there are total of 6 processes of scope in predictive projects. We'll talk about the control and scope validation later on when we are discussing the monitoring and control. I mean, in the same slides subsequently. Yes, Nurul?
Do you remember when we did this? The big giant chart, Suhail? The planning session is talking about, scope control. It's talking about plan scope management, collect requirements, defining the scope, creating the work breakdown structure.
Yes.
And then at the end, in the monitoring and controlling, it's talking about acceptance criteria as being part of the scope, right?
Yeah.
Now, when you talk earlier about planning, right? Plan scope management, is that in a form of a document, this planning?
Yes, these are the 2 documents I mentioned. Within the plan scope management, we do the requirement management plan and we do the scope management plan.
So those are like documents.
Yes. And if you are talking about documents, then in collect requirements, we will have the detailed product specifications and features. They are actually part of the collect requirements process.
Okay. And when we're talking about those planning, those are those are requirements that we documented.
Yes, there are 2 separate documents which are created out of plan scope management. One is the requirement management plan, another is the scope management plan. Requirement management plan tells us how to deal with the requirements, the changes in the requirement, recording the requirement, traceability metrics, and all that we already talked about. Scope management tells us how to do the scope statement, how to create the work breakdown structure, and how to control the scope, how to validate the scope. So all of these things are described in scope management plan.
That is a lot of documents, isn't it?
Yes, of course, it is predictive we are talking about. In predictive, there is
Okay.
a lot of documentation.
There's a lot of documents. Okay. Clear.
Okay, so where the acceptance criteria is established, actually, the rules were established in the scope management plan, but actual acceptance criteria can only be established at the end of scope. At the end of your scope statement. Scope statement gives you your acceptance criteria, the overall acceptance criteria, which is written in the contract. What the customer wants. How would they approve it? So that acceptance criteria is provided. It is part of my scope statement. But before that, it is also going to mention all the deliverables. If the deliverables are maybe in a shape of one final product, or it could be parts of the product being delivered over time, that could be described here. But what all are the requirements and how the final acceptance will be sought. This is included in the scope statement. Scope statement also talks about what is in scope and what is out of scope. Well, when we had the discussion of product scope, we could have established this thing that these are the things we must do in the project. They are included in the scope, and these things are not included in the contract. They are outside of the scope of this project. For example, you asked me to construct a house. I am constructing your house, but then you tell me that I have acquired extra land attached to the house, and please do the lawn in that area for me as part of the project. That is out of scope. If you want to bring it in scope, either it could be an amendment to the original contract and the planning has to be redone, or it could be dealt like a separate project. So these things which are out of scope initially, they have to be seen if they can be included in the project later sometime or not. But for the time being, we do understand that this is not going to be within the scope of the project as far now.
Okay, so at this point, you're just clarifying what's in scope and what's out of scope.
Yes.
Later on in the project, once we make the agreement, right?
Yes.
If the customer then say, those things that I've put out of scope, I want to bring it in scope, that's when
Right.
you need your change control.
In a predictive project, we have to discuss that. It is not
Okay.
one-sided decision by the customer, because we have an agreement with the customer, and agreement is even created before the thing started, the project started. We are in a contract with the customer, right? So we are very clear about what is to be done and what is not to be done. So basically, in scope and out scope is defined. But if a customer wants to add something to the project scope, we will have to discuss it with the customer. If that thing is minor, we may accommodate, and naturally we will have to revise our planning and our rates and our delivery dates and all accordingly. But if that thing is completely irrelevant and it is as big as the project itself, then probably we would say that no, it cannot be included in the scope. You could initiate it as a separate project, and we probably will do it, but not at this project. It could be within the scope of another project.
Yep, clear.
And we can also give some constraints, assumptions, and all that. This is all in the scope statement. But you see, this does clarify a lot many things, but it does not go into the detail of the activities or the work packages. So you can understand that although project scope statement is quite comprehensive, it is not a detail, right? One important thing, which probably for the sake of repetition, I would say, although the scope description, it just says project and product, but this is again a very deep thinking. This is not just like that. It is the product scope, the product scope statement, the project scope statement. You remember what I told you about the product scope and the project scope. What all has to be developed is within the product scope. So how it has to be developed is within the project scope. How did the product scope come into being? That was after prioritization of requirements and discussion with the customer that, okay, we agree that these elements must be included as a product. In the product scope, maybe all the requirements are not entertained, only the shortlisted or agreed requirements are added. That forms the product scope. We do the product analysis and we create, yes, please.
The product scope is the specification of the product.
Yes, exactly.
We've talked about this. It's the chair.
Exactly.
How big is the length of the legs?
Exactly.
The project scope is how we're going to run the project.
Yep. Exactly.
Right?
Project scope is how are we going to do it? Now, before we can decide how are we going to do it, we have to go through the alternative analysis, which I discussed with you. What are the various ways of approaching this problem? Which is the selected way? That is the alternative analysis. So basically, product analysis and alternative analysis become part of this project and product scope. Acceptance criteria and all that, I have explained that everything. So you do understand that scope statement is a very strong statement, is a very important document, but at the same time, this is not very detailed. It does explain everything about the scope, but it doesn't drill down. For drilling down, we have to move on to the next process, and that is create the work breakdown structure, which is the last process in scope management during the planning process group. Last process is create work breakdown structure, right? I'll talk about that. Okay. For scope planning, what we are just talking about, what all tools we have to use. Naturally, we have gone through these things earlier. We need to do the document analysis. We need to do the alternative analysis as if we can, find out various options available to us, how to do the work, how to establish the project scope. Product analysis is which requirements are to be included in the product scope and which should not be. That is product analysis. We have already discussed them in the collect requirements also. And we can use our expert judgment. Okay. Product analysis. Okay. Yes, of course, this slide is also important. We know what is product analysis. We might have done it, but you might be amazed to find certain descriptions here which you might not have ever conceived. For example, we have heard about work breakdown structure, but have you ever heard about a product breakdown structure? Yes, please.
Product breakdown structure might be look like components of the product.
Yes, exactly. Whatever is the overall product of the project, we are trying to break it down into smaller parts and then further smaller parts, ultimately down to the smallest part. This is the basic definition of the product breakdown, which looks quite similar to the definition of work breakdown structure, where the work is being broken down, the project scope is being broken down into smaller parts, phases, or whatever, and into work packages and all that. So that is the work breakdown structure. But when we are doing the product analysis, we might be more interested in what are the parts of the product which are to be which are to be developed and when, right? So yes, there is a concept of product breakdown, and this is very common. Like in UK, their standard, which is Prince 2, that only used to talk about the product breakdown structure, and they did not used to call it a project breakdown structure or the work breakdown structure. They didn't call it like a work breakdown structure. But for a couple of years now, they have joined hands and they have gotten into an agreement with PMI, and they are using quite a bit similar terminology. They are also calling it a work breakdown structure. But from the very beginning, PMI used to say in the definition of work breakdown structure, it could be a breakdown of the work or product or anything. But the only condition PMI puts here is, howsoever you break down a project, the lowest element must be a work. The lowest element of a breakdown must be a work. Because in a classical product breakdown, if I break down a bicycle, then the smallest units will be nuts and bolts, isn't it?
Exactly. Exactly.
But what do we do with nuts and bolts? That doesn't work breakdown structure, that product breakdown structure doesn't tell us what to do with these nuts. For that, we need to convert it into work. For example, there is a nut, then we'll say is screw it on, right? So it says, PMI says, and now the Prince 2 methodology also agrees with it. They generally call it a work breakdown structure. They give you the complete independence. How do you want to break down your work? You want to break it down from a product perspective, from a project perspective, process perspective, or whatever and howsoever. That means if I give you both a same project and I ask you to develop a work breakdown structure, there is highly likely that your work breakdown structures are both poles apart. And I don't mind, because both of you may be right. One may be working from a product perspective, other may be working from a project perspective. But the only consideration is that both of you must end up with work at the end. At the bottom of the breakdown structure, you must have work, right? But anyways, from the product analysis point of view, product breakdown could be important, but naturally, I'm not really asking you to break it down in a product breakdown structure. But just to understand the product, maybe you have to look into it. You have to create a bicycle, then you must know the parts of the bicycle. So that's why product breakdown might be important, understanding the things, how they should be done. Okay, then is system engineering and system analysis. I suppose I have talked to you about the system. Do you remember that discussion? How complexity comes into a system. How does a system becomes complex? Yes, Nurul? Do you remember that discussion? How does a system becomes complex? First of all, explain to me, what do you understand by a system? Can you give me an example of a system? A simple, very simple system.
I think it's kind of approaches designed integration.
I'm not sure if you're talking about system as in a product.
Not really a product. System as a concept. What is a system?
Or a system in,
I think series of
in your
activities.
life, is there any system? Do you deal with some kinds of system? Actually, we do interact with all types of systems all the time. You drive a car, that is a system. You have a house, air conditioning, that is a system.
But that's a
We have a
product.
nuclear plant that is a system.
I was meaning, my question was, are you talking about running air conditioning as in that's a system, or are you talking about running a household? Because there's also a system
Anything
when
could
you're
be a
running.
system. Solar
Yeah.
system is a system. Why do you call something a system? A bicycle is a machine which is a system. Why do you call a bicycle as a system?
Because it has a certain way on how you operate it.
Exactly. But the most important thing is that it has got various parts, which we call the components of the system. Without those components, that system will not work. Agree? So we have various components in a system, and those components interact with one another in a strange way, in a unique way. That actually defines our system. Right? Then a system becomes complex, then it has got a lot many number of components or a lot of interactions. Either one of them, if that number increases, that keeps making the system more complex. Right? So forget about project management for the time being. Try to understand a system. System is a science. It could be anything. It could be a solar system. It could be a a nuclear plant, or it could be a plane or a war plane or something, or a gun or anything. Anything is a system. But why is, a specific system more complex? Because it has got a lot many interactions, a lot many components, and a lot many characteristics and features. That's why it is complex. So basically, systems engineering is a complete subject which is taught in universities as a subject. It is not only for the IT people, it is for everyone. Everyone does study the systems engineering, where you are taught what a system is made up of and things like that. So it approaches the design of the system, in how the various components integrate into it, and how to manage the system, like maintaining your bicycle, oiling it on and off, checking its tire pressure. That is the management. And the life cycle of complex system for a nuclear plant, how would it go? It may go for hundreds of years, but you see, we have to maintain it. We have to look at it in a multidisciplinary way. Like Chernobyl, it was a very safe system, but it resulted in an accident. It was kind of a disaster, right?
How
So,
about an
yes, please.
ecosystem?
Say again.
Ecosystem.
Ecosystem is a system, of course. Of course. I was just watching a video on Chernobyl, and I just found out that after 40 years, the ecosystem has taken over that land, which is full of radiation. But now new breeds of animals are, existing there. Plants have started blooming, but humans can't go there due to the radiation. Although radiation levels have slowed down, but at the same time, we still can't go there. But deers and rabbits and wolves and a lot many animals, ecosystem has kicked in. So yes,
Like
of course,
if
you are
you're
right. Ecosystem, solar system, and
like
there's
if
so
you're
many
talking
systems.
about a river, for example, a
River
river will
system,
have
yes,
their own ecosystem in the river. Right?
exactly.
It's
So you see, it's very interesting to know there are so many systems around us, and all those systems are basically part of a larger system where these systems which we use are components into that. It's a hierarchy of systems and components going down and down, making it a very complex system. Very complex system.
So what
Nature
you're
is a
saying is
system.
this system has a design component, it has an integration, and it has a management components around
and
it.
management
The
of the
more-
throughout the life cycle.
Hmm.
The more complex the system is, more longer life cycle it has, and the management and maintenance goes on for a very long time.
Mhm.
So, well, there are some systems nature has created. You don't have to maintain them. But at the same time, the systems we humans have created, we take on the responsibility of designing, integrating, managing, maintaining them throughout their life cycle.
Like the government system. That's
Like the
managed.
government system. Right. So we understand that system engineering is a very serious business. It is not for jokes. It is really more important even than the project management, more important even than all other kinds of sciences. System exists everywhere. It is an IT project. It is a nuclear thing. Whatever kind of project you are doing, you are uh, contributing to the system. You're actually improving the system. Anyways, so system engineering is a discipline all by itself and a very important discipline. If you look around, you will find a lot many books specifically on the topic of systems engineering. And then also you will find system analysis books, right? I know these are more popular in the IT field, but I must tell you that this is not only for IT. These system analysis and system engineering, these books are for everyone. This knowledge is for everyone. Now, system analysis is when before you can develop a system, just like we conduct a feasibility before the project, system analysis is a kind of a feasibility we conduct before developing a system. So here we study a product or service to identify its goals and purposes and create systems, procedures to achieve them efficiently. So we create a business case. So once the system analysis is passed, we can proceed on with system engineering. Otherwise, the concept is trashed. That means this could be very similar to a business case for a project and then the project management, right? So we could be designing a system within our project, isn't it? Okay. Requirement and analysis you already understand because we have talked a lot about it. This identifies, validates, and documents specifications for the project, and we have ample discussion on that. Now, another important and interesting topic is value engineering and value analysis. This discipline has uh, kicked in very recently during the last decade, and there have many books emerged on this topic, just like we had books on system engineering and system analysis. Now we have books on value engineering and value analysis. I'm not saying this was invented during this decade. The concept was there already, but formally people started focusing on it in recent past. So you see, what is value engineering? That is a materialistic side of it, that whatever we are doing, whatever system we are developing, or whatever project we are trying to do, is it going to give us some value? Right? That was the basic source of any business case. If it is not giving you business value, it is not feasible. But well, I understand that the project is declared feasible. Now what you do? We do understand this is the value this project or this initiative is going to ultimately give us. But how would you engineer the value? You could engineer the value by somehow adopting the most efficient mechanism, as if you can optimize the value with minimal resources. You do that in every project. You try to put in minimum resources or minimum effort and get the optimized results. This is a complete science in itself. How can we do that? Are we really doing it? Are we just following the line which have been given to us? A project manager's responsibility, or for that matter, I will say, even the product manager's responsibility would be to optimize value in a structured way. That is the whole discipline of value engineering. Again, it cannot be explained in just these few words or a sentence. This is a subject which is covered in many books. So if you ever encounter a book on value engineering or value analysis, please, I think you should grab it. You should grab it. This is new knowledge. You should understand it from your personal perspective as if to increase your knowledge. Now, just like system analysis,
Is
value
value
analysis is something
is
like
value engineering
yes,
different than cost savings?
say again.
Is value engineering
Mhm.
different than cost savings?
Well, cost saving will be a result, it will be a value. Cost saving will be one of the value. There could be
Okay,
many other value.
because at my company, we use this terminology, value engineering.
Okay.
Let's have a look at a process, for example, a manufacturing site from, let's say we're producing a dairy product from start to end. Let's start a value engineering project where we want to cut costs by this much.
I agree with you because all the three things, like whether it is duration, it is time, or it is resources, they all cost money. So
Okay.
you are right in saying that everything revolves around money. Value revolves around money. That is, I fully agree with you.
Okay. Thank you.
And value analysis is just like, system analysis is for system engineering, value analysis is for value engineering. That is examining the factors affecting the product service cost in a systemic, interdisciplinary way towards success with the lowest cost and required quality and reliability standard. So before you get into the value engineering, you do the spade work, you pave the ground for that. You do an analysis whether there is a need for going for this initiative or it is useless, it is not going to give us more than this value. And if there is any potential, then we dig deeper into it and we keep doing value engineering throughout the life of that product. Anyways, although these topics are not explained in quite a bit of detail anywhere in PMBOK, but generally speaking, you see that we have discussed this small topic of product analysis method, we have had a discussion of quite some time. So I just wanted to show you the importance of this topic. Product analysis is really very important. And these are all the things which are covered in it. I am not saying that you will get a lot many questions on it, but I actually am here to develop your understanding in the right path. So from that perspective, these things were important. Should I move on?
Yes.
Okay, moving on to the
Will
work,
this
please.
be in the exam?
Yes, please.
Will this be in the exam?
Why not? But not a lot of focus. Maybe a one odd question on system engineering. Very few. But don't underestimate it. This is a very important topic. Otherwise, for your physical work.
I know, but there is a lot to remember, Suhail,
Just remember the concepts. Don't try to mug them up. If you try to mug them up, you can't hold it in your mind.
I
But
know.
if you logically link things together, right, then you will never forget them. You say, okay, when we were studying product analysis, we talked about this, and this, right? Don't have to write it down. Don't have to remember it. That sequence comes to your mind automatically because that is natural.
Okay.
So I would strongly recommend not to mug things up. That's how you will be able to. Don't be really worried about it. This is not a big deal. We can always do it. Okay. The fourth process here in scope is the last process of planning in scope because other two processes are in monitoring and control. So this is where we are going to seal the deal as far as the scope planning is concerned. Meaning, based on our scope statement, we are going to expand on it and we are going to break down our project into smaller parts and smaller parts until we reach the work packages. The work package is considered to the smallest unit of work breakdown structure. Mind it, I do not mean that work packages cannot be further broken, but I am specifically saying that work package is the smallest unit in the work breakdown structure because project manager is not interested in deeper knowledge. He would have to take his progress reports out of the work packages, and therefore work packages is the smallest unit of WBS. But again, I will repeat, work packages will later be further broken down into activities, but not here. Now, this is interesting. The science of work breakdown structure. Actually, PMI has a separate standard on work breakdown structure, which explains it even in a lot of more detail. If you like, you can always go through that. But just for your knowledge purposes, for exam, probably this is enough. Whatever we are discussing here, or whatever is in the Guide to Project Management body of knowledge. But naturally, there are other standards which hold a lot of information, a lot of knowledge, which is always good for you to have. But anyways, some rules I'll just show you. We generally follow by default a rule of 100%. What is a 100% rule? Tahir, any ideas?
No, sir.
A job is considered done when it is 100% complete. Otherwise, it is considered not done at all. Meaning, the progress of that work will be considered 0% until it is 100% complete. The moment it is completed, we will say, okay, the progress is 100% on this task. Now, this might look very odd to you because we are in habit of giving the ongoing progress on every activity. This activity is 10% complete, 20% complete, 30% complete. How do you say that? How do we come to those terms? How do you say it is 30% complete?
In my head, when I think of work breakdown structure, I think of a Gantt chart, like a timeline where it
Right.
has all of the component, like 1.0, like in here,
Yes.
it's the 1.1, 1.2, 1.2.1, all of that. And so all of that adds up to 100%. And then you see
Okay.
how many has been completed. Then you know that out of the 100% of the project, you
Okay.
are 50% in.
Very interesting. You have, say, 100 tasks and 50 of them has been done. Is it 50% progress?
No, because then it depends on how small each of them are, right?
That is
And
the
how
point.
big.
That is the point. Where did you consider that? That is one way of doing it. People do it that way. They say we have got 100 activities, 50 have been done, this is 50% complete. But you yourself notice that this is not a good technique, right? Okay,
It's
let
hard.
us say our project is of 100 days. 50 days have passed. So is it 50% progress?
Not necessarily.
Not really.
Not
Yeah.
necessarily. So all these methods of measuring the progress are faulty.
It has a flaw. Yeah,
All
it's
have
true.
a flaw. You may have tried to develop some kind of understanding on that, but naturally they are all flawed. The only truth is whether this job has been done or it is not done. That's it. That is a 100% rule. By default, it doesn't stop you from changing the rule, but the default rule, which is built into the system, is 100% rule, which is quite basic and quite accurate. Whether it is done or it is not done, the day you complete it, I'll pay you the money for that. You understand that? So that is actually tied to the payments for each activity. And that is a very good way of doing it. But I don't stop you from breaking it down into other rules of your own. You could have 50-50 rule. You could have 70-30 rule, or 30-70 rule, or 80-20 rule, or 20-80 rule. That means, from the payment perspective, you will be paid 50% of the amount before you start the work, and you will be paid the remaining when the work is complete. This is a 50-50 rule. Similarly, you could have a 30-70 rule or 80-20 rule, whatever portion you want to suggest. Yes, that is applicable, but I suppose that should be applicable only to the portion of work which is being outsourced. The things we are doing ourselves, we are not really going to be paid only at the end of the work. So the progress has to be noted. So going into the inside of the project and trying to say it is 20% complete or 30% complete, which would be criminal, which would be faulty. So within our own project, we can always say that until the job is complete is not considered complete. That's it. 100% true. Only for contractors, because maybe, the contractor demands that they need a mobilization advance before we start this work. So give us 50% advance. So how do you justify giving that money when the job is not done, not even started? So you say that from the moment the job is started, it is considered 50% complete because we have paid them 50%. And the final payment will only be released when the 100% completion is achieved. I hope you get the logic of it, why I am so against about measuring the progress within an activity. Progress cannot be measured within an activity. Should not be measured within an activity. And this is the best rule. Yes, I agree. If an activity is big enough, for that matter, I shouldn't call it an activity. Let's talk about the work package. If a work package is big enough that it exceeds more than one phase or one portion, then maybe I can divide this work package into two parts, one part for phase 1 and one part for phase 2. And I say, okay, 80% of the work is done in phase 1 and 20% is to be done in phase 2. So that way I can apply 80-20 rule. Right?
Like in construction projects, there are payment rules according to the phase completion.
Yes, of course.
So
Yes,
we
that
can
is
consider them as a work package.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you are right. Not consider them as a work package, but they are dealing with the work package. Yeah.
They are done. Okay.
Okay. So just keep that 100% rule at the back of your mind. That's a lot of discussion, and you can find more details in the work breakdown structure standard if at all you want to go in further detail. But that is a very interesting concept, how to measure the progress. But anyway, moving forward.
What does that look like, Tahir, in construction?
Not really in construction. It can be applied to every kind of project.
But what does it look like in construction project where you can actually measure it?
Yes, we have got, what do you call it, quantity surveyors.
Yes.
Quantity surveyor, actually, once a job is done, for example, a wall has been constructed, he ensures how much material has been actually allocated and spent on that. And based on the spending of all the materials, he will prepare a report that 30% of the material has been spent. So they give a progress of 30%.
Okay. To give context.
Yeah.
It makes sense, isn't it? 30% of the material. Okay, so you're roughly
not really roughly, they're quite exact. Because say there are 13,850 rupees to be spent on this wall, and 25% of it is complete, then we would say, okay, 25% of the material has been spent on the construction of the wall, then we can say, okay, we can release this much payment to the contractor.
Exactly.
You can also do it when you're trying to demolish a building.
Mhm.
100% is what needs to be demolished. And then
Yes.
you know that, 20% of the landmarks, has been demolished. There are some
Correct.
where you can specifically measure, but a
Yes.
lot of the project that I'm working on, very difficult to measure
Yes, of
progress.
course. Yeah, I do
Okay.
understand. This is really sometimes very difficult. So we divide things into phases and then
Yeah.
further on for that purpose. Maybe a roadmap is for that purpose. That gives
Yeah.
us the milestones. That gives us the phases.
Yeah.
That's what you are talking about right now. Okay, let's forget about this, the hierarchy, and let's move into the from the highest level downwards. The highest level is the name of the project. Whatever your project is, you put that name here, and then you divide your project into certain control accounts. Remember, this is not classically the phases. This is in how many portions of what do you call it? Accounting units you want to divide your project. How many heads of accounting can be allocated to this project? For example, I am constructing a 3-story building, 3 stories. Each story is considered a control account, right? That means the accounting of every floor is the responsibility of a separate manager, which might be actually responsible for the construction of that, but he is also responsible for taking care of the budget allocations on that portion, on that floor. So we rather call him a control account manager. So there are 3 control accounts in this 3-story building and 3 control account managers, and they prepare their own report. So it is good that we can break our project into the number of control accounts, and then those control accounts can be further broken down to the level of the work packages. Work package is not activity, it is a group of activities which perform a certain work. For example, construction of a wall could be a work package, because within the construction of the wall you have to do a lot many activities, like you have
Activities.
to carry the bricks, you have to make the you know matter for the cement, and you have to do the
Assigned a
bricklaying,
labor.
you have
Yeah.
to do the plastering, you have to do the distempering, finishing, and all that. So when all of these activities are done, the wall will be considered complete, isn't it?
Yes.
So wall is my work package, but activities are not mentioned here, and they are not supposed to. Why? Because project manager is interested in following up on work packages, not on activities.
Because activities are so many.
There are so many, and they are the responsibility of the supervisor who is actually handling
Eh,
them.
eh, Yes,
So
exactly.
project manager is only going to ask you, give me the progress for that wall. How much has that been done? You will say, okay, this is 50% complete or 20% complete or something. But again, I would rather like to use that 100% rule. But if he wants to be specific, then I can say, okay, this much material which was planned on the project, on the construction of the wall, out of that, 25% of material has been actually spent on ground. This is quite a statement. This is quite a progress, right? So we are more interested in work package. So when we are developing a work breakdown structure, we will only break it down to the work package level, and we will not try to go further down to the activity level, because that is not our job. Scope is until the work package. Beyond the work package is someone else's job. We will discuss that later. Now, another interesting phenomena here, now between the control account and the work package, there could be many layers. But I would suggest the layers should not be so many. Because if there are so many layers, that will further complicate the issue. So maybe control account is divided into phases and something else. I don't know what you want to call it. But ultimately, you will end up with a work package, right? Okay, there is another concept of a planning package. Are you aware about what is a planning package? That has something to do with the rolling wave planning. Planning package has something to do with rolling wave planning. You remember the concept of progressive
Uh,
elaboration and rolling wave planning we discussed?
like
Yes,
80-20 rule,
No, 80-20 is
that's
something else.
a progressive
Go
elaboration.
back into time. We
We
studied it
did that.
much earlier when we
it's
were.
the
I
wave.
showed you a slide on
It's
progressive
the wave.
elaboration.
There's a
Yes, please.
picture about the sea and the wave.
Yes, exactly. So, which one was the rolling wave planning?
Like uh, mm,
Agile
Hmm?
is using a lot of the wave. It's
more
like,
I used
uh, m-
I used
more
words
detailed.
strategy and tactics. Do you remember that? One of them is a strategic level concept. Other is a tactical level concept. Which was which? You are not remembering that.
nope, I remember.
Mhm, mhm,
Okay, give me the two options. One is the rolling wave, and the other
mhm.
one is
The progressive level,
the progressive level is more of a high level, and
high
the
level,
rolling wave
exactly.
is more of tactical.
Very right, very right. That is something you need to
Yes,
understand. That when we are breaking the project from top, the
Mm,
upper two levels might be considered for progressive elaboration.
mhm,
The lowest levels are considered as for rolling wave plan.
mhm,
Now, let me give you an example of rolling wave. I did give you this example earlier, but let me do that again. I said I am a civil engineer, and I have been constructing buildings for quite some time. You remember this example,
mhm,
yeah,
right? I have been constructing buildings for quite some time. Now I have been given a project to construct a hospital, which is our building.
exactly.
I can do it. I know everything about construction. But there are certain things which are not clear in this project. Like there is a room with a special medical machinery to be installed, and
mhm,
that might be emitting radiations, and that might have special requirements for maintaining temperature and all. So my design of construction for that room is reliant on that data when that is available. So because that data is not available right now, so what I will do is I will consider that room as a black box, and that
mm,
is my planning package. I cannot break it down into further details. So I will just call it a planning package. I'll leave it there. I will complete all other work packages. I will even start the construction, but the planning will remain pending for the planning package until that data becomes available. And once that data is available, I can break it down into further work packages.
mm.
Like you gave us an example of the tunnel, the estimated,
Now,
the
tunnel
first
example was
estimated phase.
for progressive elaboration. That applied to the
Oh,
higher level. That was a
okay.
strategic plan.
This
That
is
was a strategic
tactical.
plan. You are elaborating one stage at a time. Phase one of
Oh,
the project you have planned in detail.
Mm,
You don't know anything about phase two. Once the phase one is complete, you will explore phase two and so on and so.
mm.
That is a strategic level concept, top level concept. This is
okay.
the rolling wave planning, which is the bottom level concept. It is a tactical concept. Opening up the black boxes when data is available and
So
then
in this,
breaking them down into work package. That means your work package, your WBS is still open for further breakdown.
so in the example of the wall that we
Mhm,
have to build, we're saying that we know we have to build the wall,
mhm,
but in terms of the detail of it, we
mhm.
might not know it yet at the planning stage. Is
Exactly.
that,
No, yes, of course, of course.
you know?
But
And
if
then when
you
the time comes, once you have a bit more data, then you
yes,
know what exactly needs to be
agreed,
put in it.
agreed. There's a special wall, we don't know
Yeah.
what to do with it. So that
Hmm.
becomes a black box.
Okay.
Until that black box is transparent, We cannot look inside and we cannot break it down further. So this is progress. Progressive elaboration, sorry, the rolling wave planning happens at the work package level, activity level, planning package level. These are the lowest level where this can happen. Anyways, it is not a very good example of a WBS. It is just a showing you the breakdown how it is going to be broken down. I am not including any real work breakdown structures in my examples here, but these are the rules. One more thing you might note in this chart, that every box has a number. And you can visualize how these numbers are being allocated. The main project is numbered 1.0. And the control accounts may be numbered 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and 1.4. And under the control account, we could either have the work packages or the planning packages, but directly oozing out of the control account, the work packages and planning packages will have the same scheme of numbering. For example, 1.1.1 is a work package, 1.1.2 is a planning package, maybe 1.1.3 is another work package, 1.1.4 is another work package, and so on and so forth. But this planning package, because it is a black box, when it will be clarified, it can also be broken down into work packages. So those numbering will follow the planning package numbering, that is 1.1.2, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, and so on. But as I said before, we are not going to go deeper than a work package. That is not our job. Anyways, moving on, let me conclude this. Let me delete these markings from here. Okay. Decomposing, the steps are identify deliverables and the work task needed to accomplish. Structure and organize your WBS, as you have seen. Decompose high-level WBS scope components into low-level components down to the work package level. Allocate some code of account system like control accounts, establish the control account, and code of account means that we are allocating some kind of numbering system to that. Review the decomposition of work packages and verify that they align with the project requirement. That is very important. Whatever were your requirements in the scope, ensure that these work packages address them all. If you find that any one of the requirements is not yet covered, you have to add it into the work breakdown structure because it should be complete. And in future, if any new requirements gets added, that will have to make amendment to the work breakdown structure and a change request have to be moved for doing that. So now you understand in a list form, what are the steps to decompose our WBS work breakdown structure, right? Review it once or twice, you will be very comfortable with it because we have discussed each one of these items in quite a bit of detail. Then we have got the WBS dictionary. When we have all the work packages defined in the work breakdown structure, I mean, what are the work packages? Where are they? They are the lowest boxes in the WBS. The last boxes are the work packages, isn't it? So if you could compile a list of all the work packages, that is simply called a work breakdown structure dictionary. What is the work breakdown structure dictionary? It is a list of all the work packages, and you could also, it could be a simple list, or you could also add certain columns to it. For example, what is the code identifier, cost of account number? You could give that number, you can give that that work package, and you can also add a column for a little bit of description, maybe a sentence on that. You could also give certain assumptions and constraints relevant to that work package. So who is responsible for that work package? What is the approximate schedule milestones for that, associated schedule activities, if no, or you can create a column and leave it blank because we have yet not created the schedule. So resources, you can leave out a column in the WBS dictionary against each work package. You could do the cost estimation, create a column, fill it later, quality requirements relevant to that work package, acceptance criteria of that work package, technical references, if you can provide that this technical document is annexed, or any agreement information with the contract with a customer. So although the list of work packages is sufficient, but if you could somehow provide these details alongside in the WBS dictionary, that would be a comprehensive document. That could be referred to as far as the work packages are concerned, you could do that. Now, I said it is a list of all the work packages, but nobody stops you to also list down the planning packages and the other entities in the work breakdown structure also in the WBS dictionary. I don't mind that. But the primary purpose of a WBS dictionary is to list down all the work packages. If you have shown all the work packages and you have also shown planning packages and other things, I don't mind at all. This is your work breakdown structure dictionary. I think you have broken down your scope to sufficient level of detail as if your scope can be considered complete. Your planning is done. Now you should present this plan in front of your bosses as if they can approve it. That is called, you are presenting it for scope baselining. They will approve it and then you can proceed ahead with any further work. So approved version of scope statement, WBS, and associated dictionary and all can be changed only using formal change control procedure because then it would be baseline. After baselining, you have no liberty to make any changes to that. Used as a basis for comparison to actual result. Why do we create a baseline? Because when we are doing the project, we can say, okay, this was the total work and this much has been done, right? So we have to compare it with the baseline as if we can really measure our progress as far as scope is concerned, time is concerned, our cost is concerned. We have three baselines. What are the components of the scope baseline? Naturally, it will include the complete scope statement. It will include the work breakdown structure, right? That is a diagram. It will include all the work packages and the planning packages and the WBS dictionary. Actually, WBS dictionary will include all the work packages and planning packages. So you could write them separately or they can be part of the WBS dictionary, one and the same thing. But all of these things are once approved called complete. Overall, they are called the scope baseline. This is as far as the predictive project management is concerned. This is how things happen in a predictive project. We reach the scope baseline. So far, so good. Okay,
Yes.
one last slide here. Don't forget to plan for transition and never, because acceptance criteria is part of your scope, right? And this depends on the conditions given in the contract, what is considered acceptable. In some projects, it will be acceptable when the deliverable has met their goals. But in some projects, some contracts, you will have to hand over these things to the customer. You have to install it in their facility. You have to train them. You have to transition the knowledge to them as if they can be comfortable in running the show on their own. So must consider if there are any transition requirement or handover requirement in addition to acceptance criteria. Rather, I would say that would be part of your acceptance criteria. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
So tomorrow we will start with the adaptive environment scope planning, although this is very simple, only 1 or 2, 3 slides, but still, because we are up with the time, so I would like to do it tomorrow. So this is slide number 38, and we will start from here tomorrow. Any questions at the end of it?
Thank you, sir.
Okay, take care, and thank you very much. See you tomorrow at the same time. Bye-bye.
Thank you
Inshallah.
very much. Have a
Thank
good
you.
day.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Bye.